The Battle of Merville Gun Battery occurred on 6 June 1944, as part of Operation Tonga, part of the Normandy landings. During the Second World War, Allied intelligence believed the Merville Gun Battery was composed of heavy-caliber guns that could threaten the British landings at Sword Beach, only 8 miles away. The 9th Parachute Battalion, part of the 3rd Parachute Brigade attached to 6th Airborne Division, was given the objective of destroying the battery. However, when the battalion arrived over Normandy, the parachute descent was dispersed over a large area, so instead of over 600 men, only 150 with no heavy weapons or equipment arrived at the battalion assembly point. Regardless, they pressed home their attack and succeeded in capturing the battery, only to discover that the guns were of a lower caliber than expected. However, these still had the range to hit targets on Sword Beach and in Weitrim. Using what explosives they had been able to recover, the surviving 75 men tried to disable the guns. When the British paratroopers had withdrawn, 2 of the guns were put back into action by the Germans. Another attack the next day by British commandos failed to recapture the battery, which remained under German control until the 17th of August, when the German army started to withdraw from the area. Background: on 6 June 1944, the British 6th Airborne Division was given the task of securing the left flank of the Allied seaborne landings. One of their objectives was the destruction of the Merville gun battery. Allied planners had judged from the size of the concrete gun emplacements that the guns must be around 150 mm in caliber. If so, the guns would have a range of about 8 miles and could threaten Sword Beach, to the west of Weitrim, where the 3rd British Infantry Division were due to land later that day. British forces. The unit assigned to destroy the battery was the 9th Parachute Battalion, part of the 3rd Parachute Brigade, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Terence Otway. The battalion's normal complement of 600 men was supported by a section of sappers from the Royal Engineers, 8 airspeed horse glider loads transporting jeeps and trailers, and stores including explosives, an anti-tank gun and flamethrowers. 3 of the gliders, transporting 50 volunteers, were to carry out a coup de main landing onto the position to coincide with the ground assault. In April 1944, the force was taken to Walbury Hill in Berkshire, where over 7 days the Royal Engineers had built a full-scale replica of the battery, including obstacles and barbed wire fences. The following 5 days were spent holding briefings and getting acquainted with the layout of the battery. They carried out 9 practice assaults, 4 of them at night. Due to the nature of the mission, the battalion was given additional medical support from No. 3 Section 224th Field Ambulance. Another unit that would be present during the attack but not directly involved was a company of the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion. This company was tasked to provide covering fire for the 9th Battalion's approach to and withdrawal from the battery. The assault had to be completed and the battalion clear of the position by 5 o'clock, when the Royal Navy cruiser HMS Arethusa would open fire on the battery in an attempt to destroy it with naval gunfire. The Merville battery was composed of 4 6-foot-thick steel-reinforced concrete gun casemates built by the TODT organization. Each was designed to protect First World War vintage Czech M14 19,100ths of a millimeter guns. Other buildings on the site included a command bunker, a building to accommodate the men, and ammunition magazines. During a visit on 6 March 1944, to inspect the defenses, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel ordered the builders to work faster, and by May 1944, The last two casemates were completed. The battery was defended by a 20mm anti-aircraft gun and several machine guns in 15-gun positions, all enclosed in an area 700 by 500 yards surrounded by two barbed wire obstacles 15 feet thick by 5 feet high, which also acted as the exterior border for a 100-yard deep minefield. Another obstacle was an anti-tank ditch covering any approach from the nearby coast. The original commander of the battery, Hauptmann Walter, was killed during a Royal Air Force bombing raid on the 19th of May 1944. He was replaced by Oberleutnant Raymond Steiner, who commanded 50 engineers and 80 artillerymen from the 1st Battery Artillery Regiment 1716, part of the 716th Static Infantry Division. The battery had a complement of some 100 men in all. These were chiefly gunnery crews, of course, such as my team, but also included staff officers and their assistants, medical, cooks, observation teams, maintenance teams and guards with sidearms. It was intended that the battery could remain under siege for up to 3 months, with sufficient rations and generator fuel kept on site for this event. The water supply came from an aquifer and could not be interrupted. It was a remarkable structure, and it featured prominently in propaganda of the time. Assault. Just after midnight on the 6th of June, the 9th Parachute Battalion's advance party landed with the brigade's Pathfinders, and reached the battalion assembly area without any problems. While some men remained to mark out the company positions, the battalion's second-in-command, Major George Smith, and a reconnaissance party left to scout the battery. At the same time, Royal Air Force Lancaster bombers started the bombing run, which completely missed the battery, the bombs landing further to the south. The Pathfinders in the meantime were having problems. Those who had arrived at the correct drop zone found the Eureka beacons had been damaged when they landed, and in the smoke and debris left over from the bombing, the marker lights could not be seen by the pilots of the transport aircraft. The main body of the 9th Parachute Battalion and the gliders were to land at Drop Zone V, located between the battery and Merville from 1 o'clock. However, the battalion was scattered, with a number of paratroopers landing a considerable distance from the designated drop zone. Lieutenant Colonel Otway landed with the rest of his stick 400 yards away from the drop zone at a farmhouse being used as a command post by a German battalion. After a brief firefight, they helped other scattered paratroopers, and reached the drop zone at 1:30. By 2:50, only 150 men had arrived at the battalion's assembly point with 20 Bangalore torpedoes and a machine gun. The mortars, anti-tank gun, mine detectors, jeeps, sappers and field ambulance section were all missing. Aware of the time constraints, Otway decided he could wait no longer, and the reduced battalion headed for the battery and joined up with Major Smith's reconnaissance party just outside the village of Gonville en Auge. The reconnaissance party had cut away through the barbed wire and marked 4 routes through the minefield. Otway divided his men into 4 assault groups, and settled down to await the arrival of the 3 gliders. In England, one of the gliders never left the ground, as its tow rope had snapped on taxiing. The other 2 gliders, unable to locate the battery, did not land where expected. On the run-in, both gliders were hit by anti-aircraft fire. One landed around 2 miles away, the other at the edge of the minefield. The troops from this glider became involved in a firefight with German troops heading to reinforce the battery garrison. Otway launched the assault as soon as the first glider overshot the battery, ordering the explosives to be detonated to form 2 paths through the outer perimeter through which the paratroopers attacked. The defenders were alerted by the explosions, and opened fire, inflicting heavy casualties. Only 4 attackers survived to reach casemate 4, which they disabled by firing into apertures and throwing grenades into air vents. The other casemates were cleared with fragmentation and white phosphorus grenades, as the crews had neglected to lock the doors leading into the battery. During the bombing raid, the battery's guns had been moved inside the casemates and the steel doors left open for ventilation. During the battle, 22 Germans were killed and a similar number made prisoners of war. The rest of the garrison escaped undetected by hiding in the underground bunkers. Steiner was not present during the bombing, but at command bunker in Franceville-Plage. After the raid, he set out for the battery, but was unable to gain entry due to the volume of fire from the British paratroopers. At the same time, a reconnaissance patrol from an Army flak unit with a half-truck mounting a large anti-aircraft gun arrived. A crew had intended to seek cover at the position, but instead used the gun to engage the paratroopers, with the battery in the hands, but no sappers or explosives. The British gathered together what plastic explosives they had been issued for use with their gammon bombs to try to destroy the guns. By this time, Steiner had returned to Franceville-Plage and directed his regiment's 2nd and 3rd batteries to fire onto the Merville battery. Aftermath. Just before 5 o'clock, the battalion's survivors, just 75 men of the 150 who had set out, left the battery and headed for the secondary objective, the village of La Plaine. The battalion, being too weak, only managed to liberate around half of the village, and had to await the arrival of the 1st Commando Brigade later in the day to complete its capture. After the British had withdrawn, the Germans reoccupied the battery position. Steiner was unable to see Sword Beach from his command bunker, so even though he was able to get 2 of his guns back in action, he was unable to direct accurate fire onto the landings. However, observers with the 736th Infantry Regiment, holding out at La Brèche, were able to direct his guns until that position was neutralized. On the 7th of June, the battery was assaulted again by 2 troops of commandos from No. 3 Commando, part of the 1st Special Service Brigade. The attack in daylight was repulsed with heavy losses to the commandos. As they withdrew, they were engaged by the battery's guns firing over open sights. The British never succeeded in completely destroying the battery, and it remained under German control until the 17th of August, when the German army started to withdraw from France.